This is the cheapest Apple setup, period. This might be very far-fetched, but yes, you read the title right, you saw that thumbnail. This is truly the cheapest Apple setup you can buy. So today, I'm going to walk you through what you get with this setup, how I got it for only $90, what it's like actually using the setup, and some things I would improve. Because you got to remember, cheapest doesn't always mean best. So to start off, let's go over what you actually get with this Apple setup. Because it's important to note that I did not include everything in the Apple lineup. But being realistic and me being the tech-savvy guy, this here is everything you need. And there is a catch to that too, which I will go over later on the video. Oh, and by the way, you can also get a subscription to my YouTube channel for free, so that you don't miss any helpful and budget-friendly uploads just like this one. For the first device, I'm going to start with the iPhone. This iPhone is a refurbished iPhone 8 Plus, which can be had for anything between $50 to $75 on eBay for a 64 gigabyte model. This one here is actually 256 gigabytes, but that can be had for more like $200, and this is the one I just had available to me at the time, and I didn't need another one. This thing can be updated all the way to iOS 16, much like an iPhone X. The iPhone 8 Plus is a great and very common choice for many budget-conscious consumers looking to get an iPhone due to its low entry price, large display, stellar speed, and battery, as well as good software support. While Apple has officially left this device out of the iOS 17 update, it will still be receiving security updates for about another 2 to 3 years, and with the iPhone 6s still receiving security patches, we can assume that this iPhone won't be losing security patches anytime soon. An iPhone 8 Plus is an affordable option over an iPhone X and offers more promising performance and battery over an iPhone 6s Plus or an iPhone 7 Plus. I specifically chose an iPhone 8 Plus because, as you can see, I chose not to include an iPad in this setup. There is a reason I chose a larger iPhone over a standard size iPhone and an iPad. First, budget. Adding an iPad 5th generation to the list, our setup would go from $90 to $190, as the current going price for an iPad 5 is around $100 if you can get a good deal. Second, iPads somehow always age worse? I have no idea why, but every iPad I try on its final update seems to lag way more than any iPhone. Despite iPads theoretically having more powerful chips, it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. Anyways, I chose a plus-size phone to make up for the lack of an iPad. Oftentimes, an iPad will be a go-to choice for around the house or out and about browsing and mobile tasks that you would normally use a computer for. I like to call it couch browsing, basically where you want a device that has a nice display without the bulk and heat of a laptop. And I also call it that because I use my iPad on the couch. I don't know how else to describe that other than that. However, without that larger, more convenient screen size, an iPhone 8 Plus is what you're going to be making do with. And I have no issue with that. I personally feel that the iPhone 8 Plus has a really nice sized display, perfect for content consumption, light browsing, and light work tasks. Many people hold the iPhone 8 Plus as one of the greatest choices because of its larger screen size, and there are a sizable amount of people, including myself, who would have liked to see an iPhone SE Plus using the same design as the 8 Plus. It is still a really great device in 2023, and is also the most reasonable option that I would choose for a budget Apple setup. Next up, we got the MacBook, and there are a couple reasons why I chose this model in particular. The reason I chose a MacBook over, say, a Mac desktop, such as a Mac Mini or iMac, is because those items are more ideal for those who can justify the cost of a portable Mac or iPad in addition to a Mac desktop. The best Mac, just like PCs, will always be a laptop due to portability, convenience, and universality. My second reason for choosing a unibody MacBook is that any unibody MacBook is supported by a super useful tool called Opencore Legacy Patcher, and that's going to allow us to install a newer version of macOS, since this specific MacBook lost support at OS X El Capitan. The third reason I chose this late 2008 aluminum unibody MacBook is because I was able to get this one for dirt cheap. I picked up this MacBook in a lot of 3 MacBooks, 2 which were working and 1 which was for parts only. I paid $30 for this lot, so dividing that by both of the working laptops, we get $15 per laptop, which is a steal. Using Opencore Legacy Patcher, I decided to install macOS 12 Monterey, and there's a good reason for this. I chose macOS 12 because it is the oldest supported macOS currently at this moment. And while technically macOS 11 Big Sur it's going to be losing support in a few months, and I don't feel like dealing with that because that's something that means I have to update, and you would too. Opencore Legacy Patcher has also ironed out most of the kinks in this specific version, while Ventura and Sonoma are still plagued with many issues that the average consumer, like you, might not be able to fix on your own. Hopefully by next year, these issues will be more ironed out to make computers like this one more viable options for those on a budget. For specs, this laptop has the base model 2 GHz dual-core Core 2 Duo with the maximum 8 GB of RAM installed, which actually came with the laptop, and the cheapest SSD I could find. This SSD is DRAM cache-less. However, this MacBook does not use the SATA 2 interface, meaning that speed is a bigger issue on the side of the computer, not on the SSD. I got this 128GB Kingston A400 SSD on sale at Memory Express for $15, which totals this laptop price to $30, which is amazing. Let's be clear. These kinds of ultra budget setups and ecosystems are really hard to come by. And that's not from a price perspective, but from a time perspective. It took me about 5 months to find this crazy deal on these MacBooks. And although the iPhone 8 Plus is quite old already, prices are always dropping. So yes, it's going to be difficult to find the crazy good deals that I did, but it all takes time and motivation. I found that spending about an hour a day looking is a good way to find good deals, because you get to see new posts every day, and with local listings, you can give the seller an offer. These MacBooks were on a listing for $60, but I was able to talk him down to $30. It takes effort and dedication to create such a cheap setup, but it is all worth it in the end. I personally think the biggest hurdles in this case are actually finding an iPhone 8 Plus for $60, because people are usually quick to snatch them up. Many users online will note that American markets are also more saturated with cheaper prices and good deals on such products, as well as quantity of such products, so depending on your location, you may have an easier or harder time in your journey to find the best deal. But how do these devices actually hold up? Well, it might actually surprise you. Well, yes, the iPhone is a lot newer than this MacBook. I would actually argue that the MacBook is a lot snappier, with some tweaks. First thing I did, and basically everyone using a pre-2012 unibody MacBook or MacBook Pro should do, is open System Preferences, go into Accessibility, Display, and enable Reduce Motion and Reduce Transparency. This will greatly improve the performance inside macOS, as well as reduce temperature and stress on the CPU and GPU. However, I'm overall pretty surprised with how well it runs, despite being 15 years old. The iPhone is where you can really see performance hits. iOS 16 does add value to the 8 Plus, and it means that you can use it for longer, but I really feel that Apple should have trimmed down iOS 16 for the device, just like they did for iOS 7 on the iPhone 4. Swiping and gestures is choppy even on the home screen. This iPhone is suitable for virtually any tasks, with it still being supported. And also, it supports the checkmate exploit, which means you can jailbreak it with ease, if you are into that, that is. My only real complaint with the iPhone is the slightly choppy experience. Otherwise, this is a great device. It works well for content consumption and telephony activities, such as calling or texting. FaceTime also works just fine. So, it's pretty much complete as a phone. Yes, it has 2 cameras, and they're both completely acceptable for this price point. For anyone wondering, unlike most typical dual camera phones from the time of this release, like an LG G6 or a Samsung Galaxy Note 8, which came with a main shooter and an ultra wide, this phone comes with a 12 megapixel main shooter and a 12 megapixel telephoto, which is effectively 2 times optical zoom. Both cameras deliver excellent clarity and decent color reproduction, so overall a great combo, but it's clear that these devices don't necessarily have a whole lot of life left in them. Okay, so let's talk about how I would actually improve this setup, because while this is technically the cheapest Apple setup, there are many things I would improve, starting with the iPad, or lack thereof. It is important to note what matters most to you. I chose these devices because they fulfill my needs better than they might for some of you. This is just my personal opinion, but even with how amazing the iPad is as a computer nowadays, I need a laptop. Plain and simple, I need a laptop. There are many reasons, but one of them is that a laptop runs desktop class software, while a tablet will always be mobile class. There are some exceptions, namely Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro on an iPad, or touchscreen Windows tablets, which are pretty capable for running some pretty power-hungry tasks. However, for my Apple setup, I need a laptop. It's not that the MacBook is perfect, it's the fact that iPadOS has some infuriating features that I hate. First, every browser on the iPad uses the Safari WebKit. This makes installing third-party browsers practically useless, except for changing the interface. And unlike how Firefox has amazing support on the desktop, the Safari WebKit makes older devices obsolete before necessary. My iPad is an iPad 4th generation, and it works just fine for YouTube Playback and GarageBand. I also use certain apps for sideloading, and I use iTunes to rip CDs and purchase music for my Android phone. iPadOS is simply not for me, except as a tablet, and I feel that it is not exactly ready to replace a laptop. I do have an iPad, but I rarely use it for more than couch browsing, and I chose a phone to be part of the cheapest Apple setup, which is kind of out of the question with our phone-dependent society that we live in. The iPhone 8 Plus is big enough for me to enjoy myself on my couch or quickly search up any information that I need. However, for many of you, an iPad is a crucial part of your life. For this reason, I would avoid buying a 5th generation iPad from 2017. You might think that it has similar performance to the iPhone 8 Plus, however, it is very laggy and slow during day-to-day use. I personally recommend that you use an iPad 7th generation or newer or equivalent iPad mini, Air, or Pro. This way, you can enjoy your iPad instead of making it feel like a burden. Next up is support. I've already touched on this briefly, but the iPhone 8 Plus will be losing security patches most likely within the next 2 to 3 years. This is crucial if you care about longevity, and you may need to upgrade to a newer device 2 years from now. As for this MacBook, that really depends on whether Opencore is still able to spoof the model identifier of the device, and even after the full transition to Apple Silicon. That also depends on if the drivers are no longer in macOS and are able to be reinstalled or patched in. In reality, it's really dependent on how Apple handles the complete transition to Apple Silicon and completely drops support for all Intel Macs. Using Opencore, certain features are also disabled in macOS, such as Sidecar. There is a way to fix this by enabling feature unlock in Opencore. However, this only works if your hardware is supported. For instance, AirDrop doesn't work with older Wi-Fi cards, and Sidecar may run into similar issues. For that reason, I definitely wouldn't recommend using these older Macs. However, if you have no problems with that, absolutely go for it. You can find some great deals if you are willing to use Opencore. Alright, let's talk about other things I would improve with this setup. Starting with the most key component that I would upgrade or replace, the MacBook. This MacBook is the oldest Mac supported by Opencore Legacy Patcher, meaning that it is also the slowest because it's a laptop. One of the first things I did in system preferences was turn off all animations and reduce transparency. This really helped a lot and improved the performance to the point where I consider it totally usable. However, if you are attempting to run anything like GarageBand or iMovie, you would have to download non-Metal versions since this MacBook does not support Metal. For any of you who don't know, Metal is a graphics API that Apple switched to in 2018. With the update to OS X Mojave 10.14. It effectively dropped support for all Macs older than 2012, unless the GPU was upgradable, such as on a Mac Pro or iMac. In the context of this MacBook, that means that any Apple app that depends on Metal will not run and will give you an error message when you try to run said applications. To avoid this, either download older non-Metal versions, which are helpfully linked on the Opencore Legacy Patcher website, or get a Metal compatible Mac. I personally would recommend going with a mid-2012 or newer MacBook Pro. That way you receive Metal support, which allows you to run these Metal dependent applications. The 2012s also have way better performance, so if you can definitely go with one of those, you should. Next is the iPhone. Let's be clear. Headphone jack, USB-C, unlock bootloader, those are all dreams we've had. But none of those are possible in this budget market. Technically, you could get a headphone jack on an iPhone 6s, but it's not known to be super performant on iOS 15, and the battery life is also greatly decreased. So we are stuck with what we've got. The iPhone 8 Plus is great for its display, battery life, and dual cameras, but if I were to upgrade, I'd probably go for an XS Max or 11 Pro Max. These are both still affordable options and would have overall better performance as well as triple cameras on the iPhone 11 Pro Max. I personally wouldn't go for anything newer than a 12 just because of the boxier design. I find that the rounded edges really sit nicely in my hand, and I do wish that Apple would bring back rounded edges. It makes caseless way more comfortable, and I prefer caseless because it allows me to appreciate my phone's design. As well as that, if a headphone jack and battery life is really important to you, why not go for an older device? The iPhone 5S and SE first generation are great budget options with great battery life. Both are no longer receiving updates. However, the iPhone SE does have iOS 15, so most apps will still be supported. And speaking of older devices, let's talk about small phones. I love small phones. There's something about actually being able to fist your phone instead of awkwardly holding it like a giant behemoth while trying to watch your favorite YouTuber. Unfortunately, Apple has officially killed the iPhone mini, which leaves us enthusiasts wondering what to do. Well, that's actually not a huge problem because Apple has already produced a number of small phones. And while yes, the SE 2022 could be considered as a small phone, it really isn't by today's standards. Sure, but it's nothing compared to a mini, SE first generation, or 5S or 5. So, if you are pressed for a competent small phone, try to find a good deal on a used 12 or 13 mini. However, if you want a smaller phone or a more affordable option, get a 5S or SE first generation. I would hesitate to go any older than a 5S because a 5 has pretty bad 4G support, which means you won't be getting good reception inside the city. And a 4S or older has a really small display for anything nowadays. I used a 5S for months, and I really enjoyed it. The only complaint that I had was that it didn't perform great on iOS 12. However, a 5S on iOS 10 is pretty common, and they aren't that expensive either. And yes, you can use iMessage with every one of your iPhone friends with any of these devices. However, because of the iOS differences on the mini phones and a 5S, the battery life is slightly less than a 5S. However, they will both deliver just fine, and you will love either options. That's all I had planned for this video. If you want to see me upgrade my 2006 Mac Pro from stock to powerhouse, that video is here. And if you want to see the best budget Bluetooth and wired headphones for your budget Apple setup, that video is here. Oh, and leave a comment on what you'd like to see next on the future. My name is Karsten, this is TechBox, and I'll catch you all in the next video.